Welcome to Straight Lines. This is where life lessons meet leadership, where business gets a front row seat, and where you will get a blueprint for success. Whether you are managing a team, building a brand, or just trying to lead yourself better, you are in the right place. Because here on Straight Lines, we believe the shortest distance between purpose and progress is truth, clarity, and action. Straight Lines brought to you by Blue Book. Baseball Blue Book has been the game's trusted directory since 1909. And now it's where businesses connect directly with players, parents, and coaches. Create a profile, promote your services, and join a community. If your business wants to stand out, it's time to get in the book. Download Baseball Blue Book today from Apple or Google Play. Awesome, excited today as ever. All the shows we've done so far. Got a long time acquaintance, and it's great to reconnect here. A respected voice in Boston sports media and a professional who has been a long and distinguished career covering some of the most iconic teams and moments in New England sports history. Tom Leyden is known for his insightful storytelling, deep knowledge of the game, and the ability to connect sports to a larger human experience behind the headlines. Tom recently founded 1017, which we're going to talk about quite a bit, and just a long time. So good to see you, brother. Welcome to the show, my man.
When I think back to when I first met you, it was in the year, I think 2001, because I started in
Well,
2000. So you being the baseball coach, we didn't
mhm.
really start interacting with you until that spring of 2001. And I truly give credit to Dave Lesko, who's still there, because he was and still is so supportive of everything that happens. I mean, listen, Tim, at the time it was still Allentown College. I think we
That's
were
right.
about to transition to DeSales.
That's
So I saw the
correct.
birth of DeSales, and what a great job that whole organization and school has done over the course of now a quarter century. Really impressive to see. You were always competitive. And when I got more than anything else, and Nolan was there when
Yeah.
I was there, the fact that you were coaching your son and how much, and this was put on full display when you retired, your players and everybody who you influenced over the years loves you as a leader and as a mentor. So I'm honored that you asked me to join you. And I was fascinated by what you're doing now. So no surprise that you've enjoyed some success outside of the dugout once you
Well,
decided to
so
hang up the spikes.
that's right. Yeah. Sometimes a blind squirrel finds, the proverbial nut. You know that. I wanted to touch on just a couple things we want to talk about. Your distinguished career. Um, Sports director and anchor for in Boston recently, WFXT 2015 to 2021. Before that, 11 years in the Detroit market. Oof, 11 years sports director in Detroit. Before that, you touched on you're here in Allentown, also with the NFL, NHL, a couple of stints in there. I also wanted to say multiple Emmy Awards and Associated Press honors. So we got the real McCoy here today, and I'm pumped to have it. So let me just run out of the block. What drew you to television, sports anchor, sports journalism? What drew you there, Tommy?
Someone asked me that question honestly about a week ago. And while I've always kind of had an answer in my mind, I truly think what was a turning point, believe it or not, was when I was young, let's say 14 years old. We were on a baseball team that was enjoying some success. We were going through a state tournament, and we were at one pregame meal. And because we were playing well and enjoying some success, the local media was covering us. And the coach said to the reporter who showed up, he's like, talk to that guy. And so the reporter came over to me and asked a bunch of questions. And, like any other young kid who was a big sports fan, I had always, envisioned maybe doing play by play or being a sports reporter. And so I answered his questions, and I knew everything about our team. So I was able to, analyze every reason why we were good and who were the key players and how we might win the game moving forward. And when we were all done, he stopped and looked at me. He goes, you're going to be a sports reporter someday. And I think
Wow.
just that little vote of confidence was like, okay,
Wow.
maybe it is possible. Here's a guy who's doing it, and he sees something in me. So I always pursued it, and it was a very interesting journey. And I loved the time I had in Allentown. You shrugged a little bit about Detroit. Detroit was an unbelievable and remains an unbelievable sports city because you have all the professional sports and the colleges. We'll talk about some of it, but why did I want to do it? I was always a sports fan. I think I've had the gift of being able to put things in perspective because it's not just about rattling off stats. There's a lot of people who can rattle off stats and have this encyclopedic knowledge of sports, but it's the people who can quickly identify what's the takeaway moment. Recently, Indiana wins the football national championship. And as soon as Mendoza went over the goal line and he had that ball outstretched, I looked at
Iconic.
my girlfriend and I said, that's the cover shot on Sports Illustrated. And
Uh,
sure enough, like 2 days ago, it came out and there it was. I was like, you just kind of know. You have
you
that
know,
instinct of like what the moment is. And that was luckily one of the skills I had growing up. So that's kind of what started it and what kept me engaged for so many years.
it's so cool. I mean, and that was an iconic shot. I'm like, I felt the same way. Okay, that's going to be a poster. It's going to be everywhere and
Yeah.
anywhere as well. It should be. That was, I mean, what a game that was, and what a player that young man is, and probably be the number one pick for the Raiders whenever they get a coach, I guess. It's funny. I go back. You mentioned that when I was a kid, I did the same stuff. Like you had the cassette recorder, and we used to play APBA baseball, card game, dice. It was awesome. And I'd be sitting there doing play by play or, on a board game, recorded it and listened. I mean, it was a lot of fun. And by happenstance, I get a chance to do some of that in the booth with Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs. And, it's awesome. It's just, I get to go to the game. I talk about the game, shoot an open. I don't know about you. I'm always the most nervous in those 3-minute opens because I want to get it
Well,
right.
Well, the
Right.
worst thing is when they make you rehearse it
I-
because, in all honesty, you do it once and you're feeling pretty good about it. And
yeah.
I always hated rehearsals because it's like, oh, I just want to do it. Like, I don't want
Yeah.
to have to run through this thing. But you understand as you go up the ladder that there are so many more people than just you as the announcer. The director needs the rehearsal, the producer needs the rehearsal, the camera guys need the rehearsal. So I understand that. But to your point, when I was young, I used to, believe it or not, impersonate voices and do post game interviews like, hey, this is Tom
Same
Leyden on
thing.
the sidelines with Tim Neiman. And Tim, tell me what happened out there. Well, Tom, I got to say, that
Yeah,
was me
same
when I was 12.
same stuff. I mean, it's funny. You might be a long lost brother. I don't know. How's it changed over the years, Tom? Back a lot of pen and paper. Still, some old school guys, a little pen and paper and notepads, which is still needed. But and all the tech and all the things that evolved over the years. How have you seen it morph here in the last 2 decades?
Oh, unbelievably. And it's no surprise, but I can give some tangible examples. I'm going to go back in time to 2005, which was the first year that we were covering Michigan State. I was covering Michigan State in the NCAA basketball tournament. And we were in Worcester,
Hmm.
Massachusetts.
Yep.
And all we had to worry about, Tim, was going into the locker room and getting some sound bites from the players and coaches that we were then going to air on our 5, 6, and 11 o'clock newscast. That was it. That's all we had to do. There was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was no
No.
social media, there was no YouTube. And a couple of things changed. There were a couple of specific moments I recall. So in 2006, I believe, uh, we were in Miami covering the Pistons, and there was a news conference. And let's say the news conference was at noon. So Pat Riley comes out and he announced in this news conference that Dwayne Wade was not playing that night, which is a huge breaking news item.
Yeah.
And I got my butt kicked by our competition because 5 minutes later, I'm still in the news conference and I get a phone call from our assistant news director. And he's like, why didn't you call us about Dwayne Wade? And I'm like, I'm literally still here in the news conference. Like, what do you expect? He goes, your competition ran out of the room, called the local newscast, and broke the news on their new newscast. And that was a wake up call to me. It was like, whoa, this is a changing
Wow.
environment. And you just,
Wow.
I got my butt kicked in that instance, but it never happened again. So I
Yeah.
always knew that you had to be thinking about where you were in the day part. That competitor knew that they had a 12 noon newscast, and he ran out of the room, picked up the phone, and called in with breaking news. So lesson learned there. That was 2006. Then you fast forward to the explosion of Facebook and really more in sports, Twitter, and that changed everything because news became breaking in the moment. So it started with text, but before long, you were figuring out ways to share video on Twitter and who's getting it first, and the guys who are breaking news at the big leagues like the Schefters and
Yeah.
Shams Charania, those people who are breaking all the major trades. I mean, that's where they kind of dominate the media. And so it was always nonstop, and it just changed because, of course, the resources didn't expand, but you were just expected to, in essence, 24/7 kind of be on call so that you could feed the beast, whether it be through TV or web or social media, YouTube. And so in many ways it was exciting, but exhausting for sure.
Oh yeah, it's overwhelming. That's what's interesting. Again, it's instantaneous, whether it's true or not sometimes, but that's up to the viewer and the consumer, I suppose. But good sports journalists like you're going to get the right information out. So where's it go now, though? I mean, the next 5 years, what's next? What's next in the delivery of sports news, sports stories?
Well, there's no powerful property to own than live sports broadcasts. That's why the price tag on those live sports broadcasts across every league are just sky high. There's no stronger inventory. So the networks that own those use them as loss leaders, and they're counting on the eyeballs of people to come watch these live events, and then the advertisers that follow. But I think we've already passed the point of video on demand. I remember when I was in Detroit, maybe I was kind of an early adopter. Wasn't even an adopter. Maybe I was just thinking about it. I'd suggested, and I didn't know if it was legal or not, but I'm like, during a Saturday afternoon, you should have me in the studio. And as soon as like Michigan scores a touchdown, what we're going to do is we're going to develop a database of people who identify themselves as Michigan football fans. And
Hmm.
then we would literally, whether, who knows, maybe it's email, whether maybe it's text message, maybe ultimately this is what Twitter became. Um, Hey, Tom Leyden coming to you from the studio. We got an update from Ann Arbor. Michigan and Indiana now 7-0 after Tim Neiman scored a 25-yard touchdown around the left end. And you
Drove my
show that
car.
highlight, right? Yeah, whatever it is. But that was the concept. I knew that instantaneous video on demand, highlights on demand, and I don't know that people have gotten that mastered yet when it comes to maybe texting that. I mean, that
Mm,
might be something that we see where if
mm.
you identify yourself as a Philadelphia Eagles fan, is it possible that you might get a text message? I'm sure the NFL will control those rights or maybe license those rights. And then somebody will send that video highlight right to your phone. So like, oh, check it out. Saquon Barkley just scored a touchdown. Like that's probably, if not happening already, the next step.
What's the Yeah, we'll see. I mean, you're probably right. It's an ever changing world in many aspects, and certainly when I'm scratching at the surface here, I'm learning quite a bit in the last several months. What's the difference? Is there a difference between the Boston and Detroit markets? I mean, they're huge markets, great franchises, great stories, great people. Is there a difference in those two? I doubt it, I guess, but what was your take on all those years covering 20, 16 years, 17 years of Detroit and
Yeah,
Boston?
well, from 2004 to 2021. So yeah, 16, 17 years.
Yeah, wow.
Very different towns because
Wow.
Boston is so much a professional sports town. And when you
Yeah.
think about all of the professional championships that have been won here, from the Patriots to the Celtics to the Bruins to the Red Sox, I mean, it's crazy. And I think there's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 14 or 15 world championships since 2000 alone. Not to say
Wow.
that Detroit doesn't have the professional sports and the
Y-
passion for the professional sports,
Right.
because Detroit certainly does. The difference is there is legitimate and deep passion for college sports in the
Mm,
Midwest and
yeah.
in Michigan specifically. So I would always argue that we would cover 8 professional franchises, because I would call Michigan and Michigan State, both football and
Oh,
basketball, professional sports franchises. And they had passionate bases, fans that followed them. That doesn't exist here. There are so many different colleges. It's very parochial in nature. If you
yeah.
went to Harvard, you're not rooting for Northeastern. If you went to BU, you're not rooting for BC. If you went to BC, you don't care about Northeastern. And so all these little pockets are too small. And the only school that's kind of like big enough conceivably to break through is BC.
Yeah.
And that's where I went. But, they either need to win a lot more or have a once in a generation talent like Doug Flutie was.
Right.
If you have either of those, and you have some magnetism to your program, then you might be able to draw attention outside of your own alumni. But otherwise, it's just not the same at all. And that's the big difference, the college difference compared to the pro coverage here in Boston.
I can see that. In 1988, I had a chance to be with the USA Olympic team. I was their liaison with the Atlantic Collegiate League. So they played in Quakertown. I mean, 4,000
Oh,
people.
cool.
It was awesome. So wherever
Yeah,
the
cool.
Olympic team went, I went. Their head coach was Mark Marcus, who was the head coach at Stanford University, Hall of Fame. I mean, tremendous head coach. And we had taken the bus, from Quakertown to JFK because they were flying to Italy. And he says to me, he said, first of all, he enamored with the cemeteries, right? Like he said, what are they standing straight in, or I said, I don't know. I don't want to, I have no idea. But then he says to me, he goes, how many schools, in like a, 2, 3 hour radius? I said, gosh, I got to tell you, it's probably could be 50 to 100. I don't know for sure, but there's a lot. And same thing in the Boston area, New England. But he goes, well, he's out there in Stanford and Palo Alto. He goes, I got to go like 2 hours to get to the next school. And I mean, just
Yeah.
the density and the inventory of colleges and universities certainly lends itself into the markets. I'm guessing you might have a good story or two from either one, Detroit or Boston.
Uh, I've got a million. What do you want to know?
pick, pick, pick your best. I mean, we got to, how about, let's go the Celtics.
Okay. Well, basketball's weird. I've never been a huge fan of covering basketball because it's generally more difficult because there's less people to cover, right?
True.
So if you're in a locker room and you can compare all the different locker rooms from football to hockey to basketball to baseball, think about it. Basketball's only got 12 guys on the roster,
Yeah.
right? And of those 12 guys who are really making a big difference in a given game, you're probably down to 7. And now they're controlling
Maybe.
their availability,
Right.
and you're only getting like 2 or 3 people a day. So particularly in a market like Boston, it's challenging because you kind of have to cover them because I call it the wallpaper. It's kind of the news of the day. If you don't have it, you're missing out. But particularly in this day and age of resources, and I'd rather go tell the story about the kid who lost a limb
Yeah.
surfing and is now back on his
Yeah.
surfboard and accomplishing something great, because to me those are the stories that make a big difference. But at the
They
same
do.
time, when you're in Boston, like, you got to cover the big stuff. God forbid you miss Jaylen Brown or
Yeah.
Jason Tatum or the head coach talking about something. So you got to be there, but you're there with like 25 cameras. So you don't get a lot of that,
Yeah.
intimate experience. The most intimate basketball experiences I had was when the Pistons were making their runs to the NBA Finals and the games were on ABC and we were the ABC affiliate. So you'd get a chance to have more intimate moments with the players because you'd be doing some more long form one-on-one interviews.
Mhm.
So basketball is always a tough one. The easiest one is hockey because the guys are just so nice generally, and there's more
Yeah.
than 20 of them. So there's a lot of stories there. Football is great because you can spread the wealth, but when you're doing the Patriots, similarly, like, God forbid you miss Rob Gronkowski on Thursday. And the Patriots were very good strategically about making sure they spread their talent around so that they would draw the media there every single day. So, Brady on Wednesday, Gronk on Thursday, this person on Friday. It's like, what do you do? Like, you can't miss it. So it would keep you away from covering some other sports per se, but it's a pro town and everybody cares about the Patriots. So you had to
Right.
figure out a different angle or a different story that you could conceivably tell. Difficult to set yourself apart. The people who really dominate the Patriots coverage or any specific team's coverage are the people who cover the team only. So when we're spread out, having to, blanket all of the different teams, we're not going to have the same types of relationships,
Yes.
because if you had a beat writer who covered DeSales baseball every single day, you're going to tell him or her things that you wouldn't
Right.
tell the guy who pops in every week or every
Right.
month. So it was a different type of relationship. So we'd feel the heat sometimes from our bosses, like, well, why didn't you have that breaking news? It's like, we're not down there.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what do you expect from me? Like, I'm over
You're
at
not
the Celtics
attached to the hip.
practice,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So I think you learn as you go along and you try to not only develop those relationships as best you can, but figure out, based on the relationships that you do develop, what kind of stories you can tell that sets you apart.
The whole world's built on relationships. You know that. That's why you and I are, talking today. And if you don't have them, there's really not much of a foundation for any kind of success. Visiting here with the incomparable Tom Leyden, who's just carved out a heck of a career in his own right. And if you are enjoying Straight Lines and the conversations we are having, I would love to bring that same energy to your organization. I speak to teams, conferences, schools, and groups about leadership, resistant, resilience, and living a life that would cast, sometimes resistance, and living a life that would cast a large shadow. If you're looking for someone who connects, encourages, and inspires with you with real life stories that matter, I'm available for your keynote and special events. Please reach out to me at coachtimneiman.com. I'd be honored to serve your group. Back with Tom Leyden. Uh, I'm absolutely beside myself because I'm having a blast just catching up one and hearing all the stories. But I really want to get to what you're doing now. It's something I'm not familiar with and all those kinds of things. But what's the origin? I think you started in 22, 21, 22, 10. What's the origin of 1017 and what is it? What brought it to life?
Okay. So what happened is, sometimes you're sitting in the batter's box and it's 0-2 and you're looking fastball and they hang a curve on you and you swing and miss.
Hmm.
And it's like, how are you going to adjust? And the next time you get up there, you got to figure something out. So after 21, 22 years in the television business, I was one of 25 people on one day, very suddenly at Fox 25, laid off.
Hmm.
Literally worked on August 31st until 11:45 at night doing the news. And the next day, September 1st, by Zoom, no less. Talk
Wow.
about that if you want.
Wow. Yeah.
After 6.5 years, it was like, yeah, you and 24 other people are being shown the door today. And so that's jarring.
Oh,
And I literally never stepped foot back in the building, which was sort of weird. But I ended up getting my stuff back from a colleague of mine and whatnot. And, listen, this is your job. This is your life. This is who you are. This is how people know you. This is how they identify with you. You're almost attached to your job in terms of
yeah.
that being your personality. And so
Associated.
it's an ego blow. Why did this happen to me? I can't believe it happened to me, but it's certainly happening to hundreds, if not thousands, of people every year across the country in various television stations. So it wasn't unique to me, but how people react to it is what makes it unique. And so
Yes.
I had the typical pity party for a good 3, 4 months, no question about it, and was thinking about how am I going to get myself back in TV and how do I continue this career? Because I was 49 at the time. And I said, all right, I got to work, I don't know, another 15, 16 years, maybe just retirement age. And I finally just got fed up. I really just got fed up with this industry that I had been in for so long. In the last like 3, 4, 5 years of it, my job as the leader of our department most primarily had been figuring out ways to save the most money and doing things on a shoestring budget and figuring out ways to, capitalize on your relationships to have favors done as opposed to attacking things full throttle. And that became frustrating. And I didn't see it getting better at the local news sports
Yeah.
level. And I was kind of too old to pursue, go national or be a sideline reporter. Like I didn't want that life. And so after I got through the 4 months of a pity party, I figured out that I was going to go into business for myself. And I ended up being the publisher, which is what I do today, of a local publication. That's how it started in Westwood, Massachusetts, which is my hometown. So here's our most recent
Look at
issue.
that.
This is Westwood Living, and it's a big 88-page magazine that goes out to the residents of our hometown every single month. So this is what I call like the spine of our business. And so when you do this, you work as an independent contractor, and you have to come up with your own limited liability corporation. And so at that point, you're like, well, what am I going to call it? And so I didn't want to put my name on it per se, but I unfortunately lost my brother-in-law back in 2017. He was very young,
Oh,
54 years old.
mm.
And it just so happens that he literally passed away at 10:17 a.m. And so that's
Wow.
always been a very special time and a special number. And so there's an alarm that goes off every day at 10:17, and we call it Steve time. And
Wow.
he was, one of my brothers, right? My sister's husband. So when we lost him, we lost a big part of us. So this was a way to commemorate Steve and name the company in his honor in a subtle way. So that's why it's called 1017 Enterprises. And through that goes the ownership of the magazine. And then over the course of the last 4 years, we've built it to include website, social media, podcasting, local events, and a television show. So all of that is part of what we do on a daily basis. I've basically become the ultimate connector in our community between business owners because I sell sponsorships, advertising to local businesses who want to reach our audience. And those are the people who pay for what we do. And the
Hmm.
people who receive it in their mailbox free of charge. And they're just more in touch with their community and reading all this community content. And it's been a ball because in many ways, it does take me back to a very hyper local time of my life when we focused on the stuff around Allentown, and we focused on the high schools and the local colleges and your Lehighs and Lafayettes, and got to know those coaches and told their stories. So full circle in a way. And I've really, really enjoyed it because I run my own company. I'm my own boss, and I still use all the same skills, just in a way that the money doesn't go to the man, the money goes to me.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great story. Sorry about your brother-in-law. But I love the connection, and that story is awesome. So what's the focus now for, is there a specific focus, leadership, like I'm leadership, life lessons, stories, that kind of stuff. What's the focus, of 1017?
I think it's just reacting to whatever comes your way and utilizing the skills that you have built over the course of your career. Because, again, using you as an example, you faced a lot of live ammunition, pitches being thrown, players getting injured, things happening in real time that you have to adjust to. And probably the first time that you experienced it, you didn't know what the hell you were doing. But then the
True.
second time it happens, you're like, oh, I remember this happening in a game, 3 years ago, and here's how we reacted to it, and here's how I would react to it now. The gift of time and maturity is that you're smarter and you're able to react more quickly to situations because you have that history. So I like to always impart that knowledge on people who I interact with, saying like, listen, every life has a next chapter. One of the features we did this year, believe it or not, we had Rob Gronkowski and Julian Edelman on our cover of Westwood Living. That came from the
That's
relationship that
awesome.
I had with those
Yep.
guys. And it's kind of like, well, people in Westwood root for those guys. So they're sort of like our hometown. But the point was, even if you're superstars, like there's a next chapter. And what they're doing now, they're just once again brand new rookies who are learning the ropes. And so that's the story that we told. And I sort of wove it in with my story of how I had to reinvent. And no matter what you did previously, you have to build on that with your next chapter. So, I use the analogy that I'm taking all these years of experience and making Westwood bigger in terms of what we provide for the kids who are coming up, because better than anyone else who's been a coach and a parent, like these are the memories that the kids and the families talk about forever, 20, 25 years from now. Just like we're talking about the big tickets from back in 2002, 3, and 4, these kids are
Right.
going to be talking about, like, oh, remember that state championship game? And we went on the television show, we talked to the guys and we previewed it. Like, those are the memories. So that's why I love. I mean, can you believe, by the way, I'm preaching to the choir
Very
here,
good.
but, the people who we covered in high school, they're 40, 41 years
Yeah.
old. They got
Oh, I
kids who are
know.
like already in high school. It's
I
crazy.
know. I know. My son's Nolan, who you covered, he's 43. So
Yeah. Oh, that's
I'm
ridiculous. Yeah.
yeah, it's unbelievable, a little scary. But you're right. I coached in 1,401 games. Wasn't very good in about 500 of them or so, but I remember the kids, the players and the people and the relationships, and obviously taking that. I mean, the other point that you hit on too. I mean, you got to have something else to do, and we do have to reinvent ourselves. I always go back to the story. I retired in August, but Bear Bryant, when he retired, it's a little before your time, but you know the name. He died in a month. I'm like, whoa, that could be me. I need something to do. And I think for yourself, I mean, you are lit up like a Christmas tree, and I can tell how much you love it. Is there some leadership aspects to this? Is that what your hope is, your vision, the goal part of it, for your readers and your audience?
Yeah, I think that's a two-pronged question. One, we work with a company based out of Wisconsin called Best Version Media, and it is a very established company, the strongest and biggest local community uh, communication platform in North America. I mean, they have 1,400 of these publications with 1,100 publishers like me. So there's a
Hmm.
leadership group in place there that we lean on. Now, do we report to them? No, because we're independent
Yeah.
contractors.
Yep.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
But we use their system and we execute our business by using their infrastructure. So we learn from that leadership, very smart people. But then you apply it locally. What's our leadership? What do we do here? How are we helping people? I work with students and I develop them as writers, and they contribute to this publication, to our website every day. And I take great pride in that we're teaching these kids how to engage with community and how to tell stories, and using the skill sets that we've learned and sort of passing that down to the next generation. Now, leadership as a publisher, specifically as one of these 1,100 people, Typically, the next step up the leadership rung takes you along a path of heavy recruitment, finding other people who can do what we do. And that's great. And there are people who are really good at that. There are people who are fantastic at finding new publishers. That I don't necessarily want to spend a lot of my time on. What I would really like to do is talk to the brass and have a seat at the table and talk about business development ideas. Because when you think about working at the NFL and working at the National Hockey League and having 21 years of broadcasting experience and dealing with the biggest of big sports organizations and properties, I've seen a lot. And I've seen a lot in terms of sponsorship and how you can develop your business. And I think I've got some ideas up here that could help, BVM, Best Virgin Media, develop its business beyond even the massive success that it's already had. So that's the leadership that perhaps I'm pursuing for myself.
Yeah.
But leadership every day is leaving an impact on your community, setting an example, and sharing with the kids how they can leave an impact in their community too. I've had a kid, sorry, I'm going to go off on this little tangent. I got a kid who just got into college a month ago, Northeastern, thrilled for her. And I saw that news because our community announces it on an Instagram page. And in conjunction with that, I got an email from her mother. And her mother said, never met her, just want to let you know how much of a difference it was on her resume that she had been a regular contributor to Westwood Living and how
Wow.
that set her apart from the other kids who were, applying to the school. And we're so thrilled that she has gotten into her dream school. I mean, if that doesn't give you some sense of satisfaction, that's what we're doing it for, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's like an infinite tank of gas, to
Mhm.
keep the train rolling and the diesel fuel and the coal in the compartment. That's what you need. And you get that, and you have made an impact. You wish more people, and you've made an impact over many people over the course of your life, mine. You wish they would express it more sometimes, because don't we all need a verbal bouquet once in a while? Just
Yeah.
it's okay. It's nice to say, hey, thanks for everything you did, Tom. That's a nice story. That's awesome.
Well,
Um,
there were people, Tim, back in Allentown who gave me those verbal bouquets every now and again, who I cherish to this day. I mean, Keith Gruller at the Morning Call is a godsend, and he does, in many instances, what we do here locally in Massachusetts.
yeah,
Anybody who dedicates themselves to that local sports coverage or local news coverage is a unique individual who understands community. And Keith was always super supportive. The other great word of advice I got when I was in Allentown, because I'm sure you've probably seen people come into WFMZ and say like, well, I'm going to talk about the big sports and we're in the Philadelphia market. And
yeah,
that
no,
doesn't work. And the
no,
advice that I got, from Troy Hine, who was there many years, Jeff Fisher before him, Dave
no,
Lesko, the
that's
names
right.
that you all know, they're like, listen, cover what the people care about. And when
Yeah,
you cover what the people care about, they're going to care
yeah,
about you. And I
yeah.
saw a void, believe it or not, even in like the coverage of wrestling. I didn't know anything about wrestling, but I said, you know what? People care. When there's 10,000 people at Hershey Park Arena for the state championship,
That's
there's some
pretty good.
passion there. So if you
Yeah,
can dip into it, and when I left, I remember a number of people sending notes saying like, "Oh my God, who's going to cover wrestling?"
that's man, that's great advice. By the way, well, that'll be a clip from this episode at some point. But that's exactly right. Cover stuff people care about. That maybe they can use. It's like you go to a coach's clinic or something, and I always got to the point, over the years, like, just give me something I can use. I don't, just give me something I can use. It's kind of the premise of the book Team Killers. Sometimes you learn what not to do, right? So all the books, self-help. So I'm not a self-help guy. I'm an inspirational guy. But you look at it and, you know 10 ways to do this, 22 ways to do that, 177 ways to do that. How about you give me some stuff that maybe I should look out for, what not to do? And I
Mhm.
think that kind of goes in alignment with what you're talking about. I mean, it's so important. You probably get overwhelmed. I'm sure you did in the sports world for a long time. Now you got the beauty of you kind of carve out your day and carve out your schedule. But if you get overwhelmed ever, what can you tell others that, is there something that should simplify first, maybe take a step
Yeah.
back?
That's a really good word because that's what I was going to say. The key is to simplify in some way, even if it's small for a couple of days. And what we do now is overwhelming because more often than not, you hear the word no than you hear the word yes. It's a very sales driven business So you have to convince people to hop on board with you. And before you can even do that, you've got to get in front of them. So trying to get in front of people leads to many, many no's along the way. And that's just, par for the course. You have to accept the numbers and accept that that's the way it goes and figure out a way to get through those no's. But yeah, I give this advice. When you have a bad day, just start doing nice things for people. That's the easiest solution. If you can, go, I'll probably, today for no other reason, just figure out a couple of things to do for a couple of my clients locally and maybe stop in. And it could be as simple as saying like, hey, I saw that great social media post you had. It just gives them a boost and you can feel that energy. And it's so easy. What's hard about that? Or if you know someone's birthday is coming up, you send them a text message and say, just thinking about you, reaching out, or, hey, is there anything I could do for you? That aspect of customer service and just realizing that you are a channel of influence and change and you could make that influence positive. Sometimes that turns around your own mindset because now you're back in the hot seat that you just heard 10 no's and you're like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit better about myself. I just made someone's day better.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Used to tell my players was on everything I did, and I'm not smart enough to come up with this quote, and I think a lot of people have said it, but you haven't done anything in this world till you've done something for somebody else, and I'm
Love it.
expecting nothing in return. The other thing that came to mind there, Tom, is what we had that accident in 2021, and we lost current player in my club, and he was a great kid, but his name was Sean Anzarek, and he would always say, "Spend every day putting a smile on somebody else's face." I mean,
Mm.
okay, that's pretty good advice. Visiting here with Tom Leyden, the amazing Tom Leyden. When the game is over, what will people remember about you? We remember Tom, and he's building quite the legacy. My book, What is Your Legacy? Challenges leaders, athletes, and everyday people to think about the scoreboard, think beyond the scoreboard. It's about purpose, impact, and the mark you leave on others. If you're ready to define your legacy and live it with intention, this book will guide the way. Get your copy of What is Your Legacy today and start shaping the story only you can tell. It's on Amazon as well as Team Killers. Something else I've kind of getting off the ground, as we're speaking here, we're underway, is from the trustees chair. So kind of a minute or two clip I'm putting out with leadership and kind of perspectives on all kinds of different topics. And, from the trustees here, the operative word is trust. So they'll be talking about that and anything else. Spent 8 years on the board of trustees at St. Luke's Quakertown Hospital. I was educational for sure, rewarding, and again, relationships, that you treasure for a long time. Um, Talking about leadership and that sort of thing, and the word that goes around a lot now, the more I'm doing this, clarity, clarity, clarity. Can you? It's how important is it to bring clarity to anything you're doing? And just speaking to you so far, you're very clear on where you've been, the recovery time, and now what you're doing, building, this, pretty amazing entity and enterprise. So, you know, talk about the importance of clarity, Tom.
Yeah, what I've developed recently more so than ever is I'll sometimes sit across from somebody and while we have a script in essence, and here's what we offer and here's our menu, I think where the success comes is in having them believe that working with you is ultimately going to benefit them. Where you go will sort itself out, but they have to have a trust that you can take their vision and make it something even better. And I'll sit across from somebody, and truth be told, the best thing is like, listen, I can get you blanketed in this community because I know all the coaches, all the charities, all the youth organizations. Like when things are happening in this town, like I know about them.
Yeah.
And if you want to be associated with that stuff, you can have 10 different people or 15 different people calling you and saying like, hey, will you donate this, or will you give us a gift card here, or will you sponsor this, or give it to us through our channels. And now we can proactively say, hey, the Tim Neiman Corporation is interested in sponsoring your event. We're
Hmm.
working with them, we're representing them, and I've given them the advice that this is a good thing that they should be associated with. So that's been an interesting shift that you almost do become the liaison and conduit to the community. And it's beyond just like selling ink on paper or selling
Yeah.
digital ads. It's
Yeah.
really connecting these people across many different channels to the community. and it takes a burden off their plate. So if you can make someone's job easier, someone's responsibilities of community outreach easier, in my case, then you're an invaluable partner. So that's what I aim to do every day when I get in front of somebody, is have them just understand that if they come on board, we will get them blanketed in this community. Listen, easy question. If it's a important community for you, tell me a better way to get the exposure that you need. You probably won't find one.
That's awesome. I'm going to use that. By the way, I mean, at the point now where that's where I'm at, with some major groups that I know, the door's open. And then once you do it, I think it's always been great advice. Price fairly and give them more than they signed up for. Over deliver.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things I'm going to talk about in the area, now you're going to get what we've got on paper in terms of sponsorships, ads, or whatever, but you're going to get me too. I'm not going to, oh, thanks for the check and, away
Mhm.
you go. No, I think, you cultivate the relationship, you get the commitment, and then from there it's stewarding them, which is, I'm sure you're amazing at. They want the touches. They want to say, or they see you in a restaurant. Hey, there's Tom. I know Tom.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
knows that guy. He knows that. I mean, those are really um, priceless information and priceless advice, along with what you just said. I'm going to roll with that, I think, at some point. How about, and this is maybe a chance to talk about culture. I know you're building your own culture, which isn't that fun? It's amazing to do. But
Mhm.
you can probably go back and look at bad cultures, I guess, from in your previous careers, and what are some characteristics perhaps that identify them, that the flashlight, not the flashlight, the big light is shining
Yeah.
on them, and the culture is just not what it should be.
Well, let's talk positively first. You just
Yep.
go to the name of the company who we work with, which is Best Version Media. And the whole concept is for all of us to always aim to be the best version of ourselves. And you do that through being very disciplined in your approach every day, being honest, being forthright, and having prudence. We have an owner and founder of our company. His name is Dave Durand. We hear from him very frequently, and he speaks quite simply about that being the most important thing in life. Do you make prudent decisions? Are you a person of prudence? And there's a lot of things that fall underneath that branch. But it's a very powerful speech that I even heard last week when I was down in Orlando, because he reminds us of it very frequently. And if you just have a very honest, forthright approach to your life, to yourself, like you can't say that you want to be an excellent business person and not put in the effort to make yourself an excellent business person. If you're faking it, you can't make any excuses and say, oh, this isn't happening for me. Well, why isn't it happening for you? Because you're not being honest with yourself. So being honest with the community starts with being honest with yourself. And if you're not trying hard enough, then you're not being honest with yourself. You can't look in the mirror and say, like, oh, well, today wasn't a very good day. I didn't get any meetings. Well, how many people did you call?
Yeah,
There's some accountability there. It's like, the numbers, it's going to take you 30 phone calls to get 3 meetings. You're going to get
that's
that
true.
many no's. So did you
Yes.
call 10 people? And if you called 10 people and you got no meetings, maybe
Yeah.
the numbers didn't match up. Or if you
Yeah.
called 10 people and got 1 meeting, that's the average, right? That's
Yeah.
what it is. So you got to be honest with yourself throughout the journey that you're doing things the right way.
Yeah. And you've kind of touched on the lack of consistency, and the leader has to kind of convey. Um, I think the number one thing you've got to do, and you are this, I hope people can convey me in the same manner, is to be authentic. Here it is. I like to tease. I'm not all the gray area with me. My gray area is maybe I would just kind of go with the flow, but it's a lot of black and white, and you kind of know what you're getting. And I think being authentic, nobody wants BS. Nobody wants, come on, man, give it to me up straight. And the same thing if you're making a phone call to try to set up a meeting. Yeah, I'm not interested today. Okay, whatever. You may try to push back a little, but at least be authentic and not set something up and cancel it 22
Mhm.
times. And, you go from
Right.
there. I think authenticity is critical, and consistency, which, I think people overlook that part of it. I mean, you have to be present. You have to be there for somebody to get you. Um, we talked about some inconsistency, and the big thing for me is trust, obviously, and with the from the trustees chair, we talk a lot about trust. Um, what destroys that? And I'm thinking about some things I've said where he's trustworthy. Okay, and that's probably a one-off to me. Trust is like I could, he's trustworthy because I ask him to do something for me. There are people like that. But I like to say trust runs so deep foundationally that if I'm across the country in California, I still trust the person I've asked to do something, or, in a quiet room or in a loud room or with a full room. You know, I trust him to represent, me, the brand, whatever it is. So talk about trust a little, Tom.
Yeah, it goes both ways. I had sometimes you have people who don't pay, right? You
Yeah.
get, and that's a difficult
And
situation to
we
be
know a
in.
guy that knows a guy that knows a guy, probably. We can get that
Well,
checked,
it's
right?
so sometimes you have to have the difficult conversations, and you feel more empowered because at first when you're in this, it's like, oh my God, what do I do? But now I don't, not that it happens a lot, but I'm just like, listen, if you're not paying, you're not a partner. Like that's not business.
Okay.
That's not, this isn't a free road. And there has to be that trust between partners in that scenario. And you can be reasonable and understand that there's ebbs and flows in everyone's lives and everyone's businesses. But I pay my bills, right? In that regard,
Yeah.
I feel that I'm very trustworthy as a business partner because when those bills come in, it's my responsibility, and I make sure that even if I don't have the cash flow currently, that's going on a credit card, and it's
Mhm.
my responsibility to handle that because that's the relationship that I agreed to.
Right.
Not everyone's like that. And so part of what you need to do in life is figure out ways to handle those situations. And those are curveballs that you didn't necessarily expect, or you weren't given training in how to handle those situations. So you learn better how to do that over time. But I'm always a phone call away. Every single client is in my cell phone. So I've got 94 different companies who I work with, and every week I've got people asking me questions about like, hey, I need my house painted, or I need somebody to start thinking about like spring landscaping. Who should I be talking to? And I'll connect them, and I'll just
Yeah.
be that person. Every week we're sending those types of connections. So I think you gain some trust that way, where if I'm going to give some form of a referral, they know that it's a reputable company and that it's a person who, frankly, in our specific situation, is committed to our community, right? That's the whole essence of what we do. They're supporting what we do. They're committed to our community. They think it's a good thing. They care about you. It's that whole concept of when you drive by a billboard, the billboard just screams, buy from me.
Yeah.
But when you're talking to somebody who sponsors an event or sponsors a local publication or sponsors a high school sports team, that's a different level of engagement because it says, I'm interested in the community. I care about this community. I'm engaging with this community. Oh, by the way, buy from me. It's a different level of engagement. And you typically find, and this is what sets us apart, that people who are identified as engaged with the community are more likely to attract business from that community.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Do you, in the previous stops in sportscasting and the big markets and maybe the small market, have you come across where, man, I trusted that guy, and you don't have to name names or anybody else, but I was totally violated. And I mean, and isn't it the worst feeling in the world, Tom? Like, man, I enjoy being around this guy. It's like counting on this guy. And beyond being let go, I think I've been there as well. Sometimes it's not, the the delivery of the of what happened. It's more, it's kind of a circumstance of what the situation is. But anyway, I mean, something that maybe trust was just violated in your career.
I got to tell you, Tim, I don't think so. I mean, and I'm realizing maybe I'm super lucky, but I can't remember a time in any major way that left a lasting impact that I felt incredibly let down by any one or
Well,
group
that's
of
great.
individuals. Yeah, so
Yeah.
no, yay, knock on wood, right? So
Yeah.
I guess, surrounded myself with good people, been fortunate to be around good people, and just kind of kept my ears open all the time more than anything else. I was very lucky when I went to Detroit. This is just a little tangent where I absorbed by osmosis how to do my job better from a guy who'd been doing it as a legend for 30 years. He was one of these longtime anchors. His name was Don Shane, who was the main sports guy at Channel 7 in Detroit, a pillar upon which the brand had been built throughout the 80s and 90s. And or throughout the 90s, he was one of those guys who they just built the brand on. And I just sat back and watched. And I'm like, just do it like him. Another guy was like Gary Papa, right? Remember Gary Papa from
Yeah,
down
Gary
at
Papa.
WPBI?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
what a guy.
very
And
good.
I remember one of my producers in Berks County in Reading, just when I was just starting and sucking, he said to me, he goes, just do it like him. Just
Yeah,
watch him. And
wow.
he just had such a great personality. And that's what you do. You watch the people who you want to emulate. I'm sure you told some of your players this. Uh, I learned, believe it or not, that Jerry Rice, greatest wide receiver ever, literally watched every second of every practice and game film of himself.
Wow.
Why? Because he wanted to catch things on film that he didn't catch in real time. So I was like, well, damn, if it's good enough for Jerry Rice, I guess I'm watching every single newscast and I'm going to listen to every word and figure out what worked and what didn't work. And just that study and that commitment to self improvement, I think, is like super important. So if you do that, surround yourself with good people. Hopefully, you don't run into those trust issues.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I have to say, I've kind of been in the same boat. That certainly can go personally as well from a trust situation. What's your cadence during a regular day? And again, you get up, maybe, I know what I'm doing, like carve thing out here. I don't feel like doing that today. Is there a cadence? Is there a discipline to what you're doing? And how's that going to will equate into ultimate success, continued success?
All right, so now we're treading into territory that Tom Leyden needs some improvement in because
Okay.
every single day it is totally different. And there are, talked about the conference last week. One of my takeaways is like, is it possible for me to have more structure to a day? Because as it stands now, I do have a certain set of appointments, but it's kind of haphazard. I'm getting better. But some of the people who are most successful are much more structured than I am. And they do things to help their own mental health. They do things to help their own physical health. And those are sacred times in their day. Some people are religious and they set aside time to pray. You just listen to what different people do and you're like, okay, I need to implement some of that in some capacity. Like one person has 4 appointments every day, and it is 11:30. I forget what it is. I'm going to mess it up. I should have taken notes. I think it's 10, 11:30, 2, and 4:30. I think that's it. So every day they've got 4 business meetings. And if you can't make one of those, you're going to go on another day. I'm like, wow, that would be cool. But I'm not there because I don't have that discipline yet at that level. I got
Yeah.
to get better organized. So if there's a goal for 2026, it's probably being more organized. But to that end, I live with this like crazy ADHD, and I got 10 tabs open at all times in my life, and I kind of bounce from one to the other, and that so far has worked for me. It's a ordered chaos, and I just kind of do the best with it as I can.
Yeah, that I'm a little similar, I'd say. I got, you know, multiple projects going on at once. And at some point you just gotta say, all right, that's the priority. I gotta get this thing done today and then move on to the next one. I don't know how you are, I also ran into the fact that I'm very good under pressure.
Oh
When there's
yeah,
a
the
deadline,
deadlines. But my whole
boom,
life has been deadlines. So
been a
I'll
deadline.
and my
It was
girlfriend actually gave me great advice because I stress out as we get close to the deadline. And she just sat me down one day and she goes, you've been doing this for 43 months. She's like, when
still
have
young.
you ever missed your deadline? I'm like, well,
Yeah,
I haven't. She goes,
yeah,
exactly. Chill out. Like, you're going to get it done. It's in your DNA. So,
that's
what's up with
great.
all the anxiety?
That's great. Visiting with Tom Leyden, who's been a great visit today. Tom, where can people find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in anything they've heard today on this show? Please share.
Oh, I appreciate it. A couple different ways. You can visit the website, which is trafficked every day. That's westwood-living.com. You can find us that way. But more directly, I'm very active on Instagram at Tom Leyden, which is TomLeyden. We also have a Westwood Live Instagram handle. But I don't use Twitter as much as I used to. It's a different world. I was in like
It
this
is.
breaking sports news world where we were
Yeah.
commenting on stuff. But I do have a Twitter account. It's kind of like, what do you do with the 17,000 followers that I had there? I feel like
Wow.
I lost them, right? I kind of blew
Yeah,
that audience. But every once in a while, I'll interact there as well. But really, Instagram at Tom Leyden and at the website, westwood-living.com.
that's great. One last question I asked all the guests. The name of the show is Straight Lines. The concept, and you'll know, I was in Lynn, Massachusetts in '05 with the Allentown Ambassadors, right? Coaching with, actually it was '05, with Ed Ott was the manager. So we're
Wow.
at
Yeah.
Lynn, North Shore Spirit, Rich Gedman's the manager. Um, I mean, it was crazy. But I always was infatuated with how the grass was cut, how the field was lined, just stuff, details. So I'm sitting in the bleachers before the game because we got there early, and it rained the night before. Nice ballpark, and I thought there was a football stadium right there too, I believe. But it was rain, so the staff's out there wiping the seats down, blah blah blah. Also, was a guy like me and you, like, okay, guy's pretty professional, he's doing the same thing, and I'm thinking, no way, he's pouring a beer or selling popcorn. There's no way, right? So I get up, walk across the field to left center field where the locker room trailer was. Pretty nice. He's walking along with me, and I just said, look, you know, the perception is amazing. I said, I'm just really impressed with what's going on here. You care about what's going on for your customers and so forth. Most people just, hey, take a paper towel, wipe the seat. No, every seat's wiped down. And I just want to say, I think that's pretty cool. And he puts his hand out for bouquets. He said, I don't get those very often, hardly at all. He said, I'm the owner of the team. And it turned out, right. And it turned out on top of it, he was the CEO of State Street Global at the time. So some big Boston names and areas right there. So to me, it's details and, people caring about what they're doing. And of course, the straighter your lines are, the more success you could have. And we all know the path to success is not anywhere near a straight line. But if we can change the tire and get the car back on the highway, we got a shot to do that. Any thoughts on what that might mean to Tom Leyden?
Absolutely. And I have a similar story to what you just said. And you, as a person who speaks to a lot of audiences, you probably sometimes throw some spaghetti on the fridge and see if it sticks. And
Yeah, no
then
kidding.
sometimes you find something that sticks. You're like, oh, okay, I'm going to use that again next time. Well, I vividly recall being told a story, and it's about accountability and pride when I was in high school. And, typically high schools can get very messy. And in our high school, if you had detention, your job was to clean up the garbage.
Mm,
And that was typically left to those people. Well, there was one teacher who walked into a hallway one day and started picking up the trash. And another teacher said, like, Joe, why are you doing that? And he said simply, this is my school too. And I take pride in the fact that this is my school. And just by setting that example, he let it be known that kids became more accountable and they didn't leave trash because it's their school too. And you're in it together. And so I told this one, it obviously resonated with me. I remember that 35, 40 years later, but I said it once at a high school auditorium gathering of all these high school kids.
yeah.
Didn't think anything of it until I had three different teachers come up to me and say, I've never heard them be so quiet. He goes, that message is 100% true. And we appreciate that you said that because everybody has to take pride in what we're building together. Because if only the leadership takes pride in it and the people who are part of the team don't take pride in it, it ain't going to get to the finish line you want to get to. You got to be in it together, and you all have to have that standard set and be focused on meeting that standard every day.
What a wonderful story. I love it. And it's exactly the kind of thing. Everybody's got, different takes on the straight lines concept, and it's grown rapidly. And I'm really proud of that. But, the beauty of it and uniqueness of it is, what does it mean to you and how can you give the message to somebody else? You impacted more people than you think that day. And that's going to last with them for a very long time, probably the rest of their lives. For those that you made an impact, they walked out the doors like, man, I'm inspired. That was awesome. Thank you for joining me on Straight Lines, where leadership lessons meet the game of life. If you enjoyed today's show, share it with your friends and colleagues. Subscribe and connect with me on social media for more insights. And if you want to dive deeper, check out my two books, What is Your Legacy and Team Killers. Please visit CoachTimNeiman.com and check out our YouTube channel at the Neiman Legacy Network. Until next time, lead with clarity, play with purpose, and keep those lines straight. Tom Leyden, man, this was a joy for me today. I absolutely loved it. I've can't thank you enough for being on with me. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Coach. Always enjoyed our friendship. Learned a lot from you. Was so proud of all the success that you achieved at DeSales. Say hi to the 43-year-old Nolan. I can't believe it. And anybody else who I may have crossed paths with. Really an honor to be with you. And thank you so much for asking me.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.